we'll just say who would like to go next and who would like to go next. This is about an hour long. I expect, because this is a popular topic, right? So I think we'll go a little bit longer. If you have a DNA story to share, please do. And if you could keep it somewhat brief. It's not easy to keep DNA stories brief, though. It's just not. But we want to know what your story is and your discoveries, whether it's good, bad, indifferent. We really want to know, and we want to come together as a community. I'm really excited because this gives us an opportunity as a global community to talk about DNA. Sometimes we get in our projects and we only talk our little silo area. So this gives me an opportunity to see what everybody's researching, what your discoveries are on a global level. So well, actually, I would like to pick somebody to go first, and then we'll let somebody go afterwards. But Pip, I have not seen you in a long time. I think we're about an hour away from each other now. We could probably pass the moonshine over from our own DNA ancestors and relatives. So would you like to go first and kick off the DNA swap?
Sure. I'd be glad to. I started using DNA a long time ago. I think Ancestry was first. And I have about 3 other companies, Living DNA, 23andMe, and FTDNA. And I actually even have my heritage kit here at the house that I've not done yet.
Do you want to take it live?
But I think the thing that I enjoyed the most about DNA, starting with DNA, was the ethnicity estimates. For example, 23andMe and Ancestry nailed it with the paper trail. They got almost exactly what my paper trail was saying. Proudly to say that I'm about 60% Scottish in my lines. And then there's a mix of English and some German and a couple French lines. So it kind of scatters around a little bit. But those Scottish lines were the ones that I was really looking to confirm. And it did. The paper trail, the DNA confirmed the paper trail. However, I do have an ancestor named Thomas Shepard who in all of the oral tradition that had been handed down, was a son of a James Shepard of Virginia. And you see this in a lot of different public. I don't know if I can do a share screen here real quick.
Yeah, you can.
There we go. Is that sharing?
Yeah.
Can y'all see that? Okay, yeah. Down here in the sources and stuff.
If you zoom in a little bit, we'll be able to see a little bit better.
Zoom in. You have to tell me how
up
to
at
zoom.
Up at the top in where the URL is typed on the right hand side, there's a magnifying glass. Up.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Zoom in.
Yeah, so plus, yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, keep going. There you go. Because when we have it up on the live, we have it on YouTube, it'll be able to be,
okay.
You can
Good.
see it there. Yeah, that's
okay,
good.
You'll see. Right. Okay. Thanks for that. I appreciate that. You'll see some of the sources down here. David Reese, Thomas and Nancy Stanton Shepard, Heritage Old Buncombe County, which repeats. There's Nancy Aiken Shepard, who was an aunt by marriage, also has this. Thelma Welch Swanson, a cousin of mine through my Welch lines that were near where the Shepherds settled in Macon County, wrote a really large book, gathered stuff over years, that information. And then there's this, Kathy Hurst Jericho, also a cousin of mine. So we have all these things that were written in these heritage books and stuff, and all the oral history came down, is that Thomas Shepard was a descendant of George Shepard of Virginia through his son James. Well, as it turns out, after just about a year ago, I had to add this note here. Please read the research notes before editing this profile. And I included an email that I got from a researcher on FTDNA that I was confirmed to be a descendant of Andrew James Arrowwood. It turns out that I think the probability of this is pretty high. Several of the matches that I got on FTDNA or Harwoods or Airwoods, lots of them, and only one shepherd. So what we had to do was share our raw data with a geneticist who compared our data, and this is what we came up with. So after years and years and years of being a descendant of George Shepherd and his son James, it turns out I'm a descendant of Andrew James Arrowwood instead of Shepherd. So all the research notes and all the stuff that I'd done all those years has been overturned. So what I had to do was I had to detach Thomas from his purported father, James Shepherd, and attach him to Andrew James Arrowwood. Lucy, James's wife, was known to have had several children by a few children by James Shepherd. And come on, pop it up. There you go. And the distance between the birth dates between these two, this is my ancestry here, and this one is half sister, is quite the distance, more than a decade. So what we have here is that Lucy Shepherd probably was in a relationship with Andrew James Arrowwood and had a son, and then James Shepherd married Lucy, whatever her last name was, and became the stepfather, and Thomas adopted the name of his stepfather back in the 1800s. So all those years of looking for George and trying to find out what the brick wall was, trying to break the brick wall down, just did not work for me. And so now this is my thing. I was amazed to hear people's stories about finding out that their great-grandfather wasn't their great-grandfather or their grandfather whatnot. And I had nothing like that until this past spring, this came up. So that's my story there. All the other DNA stuff that I've done has been marvelous and wonderful. This was the one surprise of all of them.
But you bring up something very important that I think everybody should know. Pip has been working on his line. I think you said since 11 years old, right? You've been involved in genealogy. So, we hear family stories and we see relatives. We go to reunions, things like that. And we think we know everybody. So probably when you were doing your test and your DNA, you're like, I got this. I know what it is. And boom, you do get a surprise. And I think everybody needs to realize DNA does bring surprises, even when we don't think it ever would.
Expect surprises. That's what you gotta do. I actually have a pretty similar story to Pip that I want to share too. So I don't know if I'm gonna share my screen or not. I don't even know how to on this thing. Wait, should probably do
There's
that.
a big green button that says share at the bottom of the Zoom
There we go.
window.
Thanks. Okay, here we go. My sharing screen. Yeah, I should be sharing. Okay. As you guys know, my DNA is Southern Italian, Quebecois, and all that fun stuff right here. And I do have a couple DNA matches actually I have several DNA matches who go to Francesco Coppola and his unknown wife. And I have no idea who his unknown wife is, but I have several descendants who descend from Giovanni, Caterina. Paolo here is my ancestor. I don't know if you can see that. You want me to zoom in?
I see it.
Yeah, Paolo is my ancestor, and as you can see, I have a lot of DNA confirmation here, See? And I'm just trying to figure out who this unknown lady is right here. For now, I just have a placeholder because I have DNA confirmation to her, but I have no idea what her name is. And I was only able to get Francesco's name from the birth record of his grandson, which I'll show you in a second. Francesco Coppola. See, I got that from the archives in San Pietro, and that gave me the clue who belonged to who. Because without this, I would have no idea how all these Coppolas that I have in my family tree connected. So I got that. So, I knew I had DNA matches and everything, but it's just really hard to DNA confirm without actual data. You need to know the names and everything like that. And
Hey, Chris, can you do me a quick favor? Because you just brought up something. Can you show the DNA confirmed? Can you go in the edit real quick?
oh,
And
sure.
so I just want to point out to everybody that I'm posting it also with a link in the chat. But for WikiTree to use the confirm by DNA option. So if you go to your edit family.
Yeah. Oh, you want me to go to edit family? What?
Well, yeah, just that link at the top. I just want to show that for your parents. No,
Yeah.
you were there. Go
Oh,
to edit.
Okay. Edit.
And then click that link at the there you go.
Right
That's
here?
fine. Yeah, that's fine right there. So you see where he has fathers confirmed with DNA. You must have a DNA statement on the profiles that the relationships are. So this would be the father is confirmed with DNA. So the child also has to have the DNA statement to confirm this. You can't just say, hey, I took a DNA test and the DNA test said that we are confirmed. And let's go ahead and click that. WikiTree requires a DNA statement on the profile for both profiles that you are confirming the DNA with. You need 2 profiles, right? To confirm the DNA, at least
Oh, yeah.
you need
But
to
also, yeah. But
have the relationship, the parent child for so you need a DNA statement. And I love how Chris did it. He created a new header. That's really the awesome way to do it. And I'm going to put in the chat Greg Clark's DNA confirmation app. So all you have to do is type it in and follow the prompts and it'll let you do it. And then Chris, you mentioned the cousins. So
Yes.
can I DNA confirm Charlemagne as my great grandfather, Chris?
Of course you can. Everybody can do that, right?
Right. Yeah, let's find out right now. I don't think so.
Yeah, that tool really, it does everything for you. Just put in the information and then it creates the output. All you have to do is copy and paste that right into your profile. So it's really, it's awesome. Another great tool.
Yeah. I learned a long time ago, you can just like copy paste it along the line. Because like what I did for Giovanni here, I also added the same tag to Frank. See, right down there. And I just went down the line, so.
I want to mention here that I have a lot of admiration for Chris's detective work, but I also admire him for knowing how to use DNA properly on WikiTree and how he has confirmed so many relationships by the proper use of DNA. And I really admire Chris for this. This is something that's not my specialty. And he has done a marvelous job of doing what he does.
I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Look at my tree.
Yeah, no, look at this. It's just, I have nothing like this.
Yeah, well, it helps that my mom tested and everything else is just like, like shooting fish in a barrel, basically. Well, more or less. I mean, I do have some mysteries on that side. Because if you read my blog, you know that I had some matches who just like showed up out of nowhere and just I had to figure out who was who because she was not talking. So I had to talk to other cousins and see their DNA test and see how they compare to everything else, and I figured it out. So, I mean, look at this guy here, Antoine Legault. I mean, I have all DNA confirmations, all that stuff, because they had kids who had kids who had kids and all that stuff. So it happens. Yeah.
Thanks for demoing that, Chris. And then let's move on. Anybody want to go next? Anybody have a story or swap discovery they want to share?
I do. Back in 2019, I got a call from one of my cousins, and he said, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "No, but I can be." So he said he had done a DNA test, and he said, "We have a first cousin that we didn't know about." And I said, "Okay." So then he said, we figured out what year she was born. So then I figured out, okay, it has to be either one of 2 uncles because my dad would have been the next oldest boy and he would have been 12 at the time that she was born. So I said, okay, so it's either this one or this one. And we figured out it's probably the oldest uncle that we had. Of course, he had already passed away. He did not have any biological children that lived. He had a stillborn who had died at birth. And then I was talking with one of my aunts, and it turned out that they all worked at a plant back in the 50s in Dunbar that was called Fletcher Enamel. All my uncles and my aunt all worked there. And this lady, mother had actually worked there too. This lady had been given up for adoption. So that's how we found it, is because she was doing her DNA and she found out that she was related to us. So we have a first cousin, and we figure that it's the one because my aunt said we knew that he had a woman. That was her words. My problem with that is that he was married at the time to someone else. And the problem that I had with that also was they all worked, and she worked there too. So it's like, okay. But that was, and I have met this first cousin, and she's pretty much like us. So it was kind of fun. That was a good story. So I haven't found anything that is actually all of my lines pretty much go the way that we think they are.
Yeah.
Well, you just made me think of a good question. I'm going to just ask this in general before I ask another volunteer. Sharon said that this is somebody they didn't know, and then when they met, they had a lot of commonality, similarities. They were not together as children and families and reunions and things like that. And for anybody who's had this type of situation, have you experienced this where there is somebody that says the same things you do, act the same way that your family does, and you just met? So anybody have a story like that to share? Tia, I was thinking you were going to pop up with that one.
Yeah, I'll give you a little blurb. Yeah, so I'm a double MPE. So I think I tested 2016 or 17. First found out my mother's father is not really my grandfather. Who are all these Morrisons popping up? Who are the Morrisons? Everybody's, pleading the fifth. But eventually my mother had some sisters pop up who got into contact with me and were like, yep, we're her sisters and so on. But then 2020, it was only like a few months into COVID. I get a new closest match. And I look at the thumbnail picture, and she's living, so we'll just call her M. And I'm like, M, what is my childhood friend doing as my new closest match? Like, I knew exactly who she was. Turns out she's my half sister, and her and my father were hidden right in front of my face all of my life.
Whoa.
And that's special.
That is a shock. That is a definite shock to your system because you have a relationship already.
Right.
Yeah. I knew exactly who she was. Her and her mother, they wouldn't even knock when they came in the house. They were so close. Her mother and my mother were best friends. I was over at my biological father's house and cabin all the time, swimming in the pool in the backyard and camping and going to the lake and fishing and whatever. Turns out my biological father's father, my grandfather, is actually on the county missing persons list. And I remember the moment that he was on the nightly news, and my mother and grandmother just like whipped their heads at each other and said, oh no. And then they quick look at me and go, oh no. And I'm like, why are they looking at me? Who is this guy? I don't even know who this guy is. Turns out they knew full well that that was my grandfather that went missing in the lake that night.
Wow.
No. Well, that's in a nutshell. I could keep going and going, but there's lots of stories.
It's funny, Tia, because I can talk and talk and I can respond, and you actually have me speechless with this one. So, wow. Thank you for sharing. Because, like I said, sometimes the discovery, and also our discoveries as we go through DNA, sometimes they hit us right in the face by another person telling us. So it's not always just a discovery on our own. Who would like to go next?
Can I explain about mine? I've put my 2 blog posts in the Discord chat for this. I have 2 times great grandfathers that I don't know who they are because only the mother's name was on their birth certificates. One of them I have actually discovered who they were, and after I discovered through DNA who one of them was, I then discovered that my two times great grandmother and the 2 times great grandfather actually had marriage banns read, but they never actually got married. So I actually found the band's records. So I've got all of it on my blog post. So if anybody's interested, there I've posted them on the Discord so you can have a read. And I've also managed to trace that line back to some people that went over to Canada that are related via that line, and they didn't know where they linked up into England. So I've actually told some of them, but I've not had a reply from anybody to say that they oh great, we know where our English roots were from, but I'm still trying to work out who the other one is. I have got a match with somebody who is actually a descendant of the sister of the man that my 2 times great grandmother actually married. So it is theoretically possible that the person she married was actually my 2 times great grandfather, but I've only got one match, and I don't think that is enough, because particularly as Ancestry seemed to indicate that I match on my other line. So this is a maternal line, and Ancestry seems to think I match on the paternal line, and all the matches that person has shared matches with me are paternal line matches, which I've not worked out who they are. So that one is still yet to be discovered, but I've certainly had some. But the most interesting discovery is the fact that one of my first cousins I've got no matches with at all. I'm not sure what's going on there, or something's going on somewhere. But I am my first cousin knows that I don't match with them, so they might know a bit more, but they might have been able to find out something, but I don't know what happened there. So
and you know, there's the saying that I say to my mom who does not like it. I'm like, well, DNA really does not lie. You know, so Hillary, when you don't match with somebody who's a first cousin, then there's a story there. There's definitely a story there. And let me ask you guys just a random question before we go to the next person. Do you think there are certain things that are carried through DNA? Like, is there a something called, you know, a food DNA? We know that there is DNA in food, but does it carry through us as humans? So something your great grandparents hated, did not like, say broccoli, they couldn't stand broccoli, and it carries all the way down your line. Does anybody believe that is a factual thing, or is it just a silly story that a family makes up?
No, I think there's some truth to that. I mean, I have some DNA matches who didn't know they were Italian. They're like, you know, I've always liked pasta. Now I know why.
I thought you were gonna say always like pizza. I was gonna say, yeah.
Who doesn't like pizza?
Yeah,
Who does not
I
like
know.
pizza?
And then my next question is there anybody here who has not taken a DNA test and you're here exploring and learning from our stories? Okay, Fairly, anybody else that has not taken a DNA test? Okay, I'm gonna put in the chat real quick a link that if you need a DNA test, if you go to that page, it's a WikiTree page. If you go through there and you click on that link, of the DNA test that you would like to purchase. And there are some sales going on right now, I believe, but double check.
Ancestry is having a big sale, and I think that's the
Okay.
biggest database.
And I think My Heritage has a sale as well. But this link, if you click on that link on that page to a DNA testing company and purchase a DNA test, a little bit does come back, a little, like seriously little, but a little bit does come back to WikiTree at no extra cost to you. So as you all know, WikiTree is free, and this helps us out a little bit.
I want to do this week an app at WikiTree, but I'm scared.
Oh, well, that's a good question. Tell us why you're scared.
I'm not like anybody else in the family, and I don't want to know if I'm not.
So the discovery is scary.
Yes.
And that's a very, very fair, point. Let me ask, is there anybody here that had the same thing, that they were a little nervous to take a DNA test, so you maybe hesitated because you were worried about the discovery?
I have relatives who will not take the test.
And why won't they though?
Great deal of it I know, which makes no sense because I've taken it 20 years ago. So I'm like, I validated you through all the cousins that I see.
Yeah.
But I think they are afraid of the truth it will disclose. So it's frustrating. And I'm like, well, you hold the key. You're closer to the ancestors than we are. But yeah, they will not take the test. And I just keep trying to chant, take the test, because futuristically, what you do benefits our generations after us.
And you said it, if they're the key person. Does anybody have any tips for convincing some? This is a deeply personal thing to do. I understand that. I understand people, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there. What happens to your DNA when you send it off and things like that? Has anybody successfully converted somebody, a family member, into taking DNA tests?
My case, my two brothers, this is an Appalachian thing. My brothers do not trust the government at all. And this is an Appalachian thing from our mountain side of the family. And they think that if they take a DNA test, that the government's going to get it and they're going to have information they shouldn't have. So that's their thing. I will not be able to convince them. My wife either. She's not very trusting either. I, on the other hand, have had 4. So.
And I will say, when you mention a very Appalachian thing, that's not a political thing. That's just a cultural thing that we go through. And I'm thinking, Delbert, that must be a cultural thing for your key person that you can't convince as well. And I think that you're going to see pockets of this. As you know, we're not getting a lot of testers from France because we can't. And I was just informed, I think, My Heritage is based, their headquarters in Israel, but they can't take a My Heritage test there. So there's pockets of missing DNA. And when you guys come to the Cubicle party later on today that Chris is going to host and talk about ethnicity, that's a whole different topic from these DNA discoveries. Peggy.
I felt like that for a long time myself, that I was worried about how my DNA could be used. And that stopped me from having my DNA tested for many, many years. But then I started thinking that my DNA is out there in labs all over the world. From every blood test I've taken, every biopsy I've had taken of myself, just through routine medical care. And I had my DNA taken quite a few years ago now, but I have explained that to people that have used that argument with me about not having their DNA taken. And when you explain that nowadays, that our DNA samples are in labs all over the place. Every time you go to the doctors and have any kind of test done, it's sent away to a lab, not just in the United States, they're sent all over the place.
And if you think about it, we shed our DNA all the time. We have skin cells that shed, our DNA is everywhere.
Well, and
I
if
don't want to
you're
be gross or anything, but that's true.
and if
Yeah.
you're in the military, guaranteed the government has your DNA probably already. And Deborah, do you have a question or a comment?
I wanted to give a comment that I had shared in Discord and even somewhere on G2G that as an African American person, so I think coming to these, I don't see other than Denise, many of us that give this perspective, here in America. But DNA has helped me to confirm the DNA of the ancestor that we were enslaved through. So that has been a game changer, a great deal, because when we have ancestors who were mulatto and they reported mulatto, and some of that mulatto can be Native American, but that's where the research is. It just really helps to be able to substantiate something like that. But the second piece of it was for me, like I shared, I took a test 20 years ago. Ancestry was in beta, and I ignored it because I'm in IT. And in IT, the data is constantly being researched, constantly changing. So at one point, I was a Native American, a sliver. Now I'm not. So you begin to understand how the testing companies are calculating and sharing what they choose. But last year, about a year and a half ago, I think it was last year, someone shared that I had a very high percentage of Jamaican. And I was like, I heard that. And then when I really researched it, I had a second cousin, which means his father was my first cousin. And it was so high, I had no choice but to look. And as I looked and researched, basically my ancestors are through England, maternal and paternal side, but my father's side was Jamaican, Caribbean, West Indies, and England and UK. And I had a woman who literally, if I was really light skinned, she'd look like my mother. She was in her 80s. So it was through her I was able to substantiate the connection through my father's side. And now the story was, how do I find Paul? And my mother wouldn't tell me. No one knew our business. No one knew her story. So I was able to get a lot of cousins to test, trying to help me isolate and figure out the DNA. But through that, I found some family secrets that people perceived that they were my grandmother's. My grandmother was their grandmother, and it's like, no, she was really your great aunt. So I understand the fears, and I will not tell this cousin because she loved my grandmother as her grandmother, but she took a test. So if she comes to me, I have to be honest. But in the meantime, I will not share this to hurt her. So I get both sides of DNA. It's a wonderful thing and it's a scary thing. But the truth is the truth, and we learn to stand on the word of truth, and that's what I go by.
I really like how you mentioned too that you have to be truthful, but you don't want to harm as well. And I think that is really a key phrase that everybody should keep tucked in their brain when they talk about DNA, whether you're talking about DNA with family members or just your coworker, and you say, hey, I found a discovery or something like that. Remember that a lot of times when we're talking about DNA, we're trying to break down brick walls and we're trying to go backwards. Some of us are trying to figure out if we're going to eat lasagna or sauerkraut. So there's all different reasons for taking DNA. But think about this for just a hot second here. And I think about this from my perspective as doing genetic genealogy for clients. Most of my work was not talking to dead people about dead people. It was talking to the living and explaining why this wasn't a grandmother, this was a great aunt, or why this brother that you grew up with is not biological. So the people who are gone, that their secrets are now coming out. And I feel a little empathy for their situations because they never imagined these secrets coming out ever. And they did a really good job of keeping them. But we're talking to the living when we talk about DNA. Most of us are sharing things to the living that are not easy. So thank you for mentioning that, Delbert. That's really important, I think. Who would like to go next?
Well, I've got an interesting story. I have a brother-in-law who refuses to have his DNA tested, and more importantly for me, refuses to let any of his children have their DNA tested, which is my bloodline that I want to cross-reference with. And the reason that he gives is because he's heard about all of these heard about the police using the DNA to solve crimes, and they can find you through your DNA. Well, the first question I have for him is, what is he hiding that he doesn't want the police finding him for? But beyond that, he also doesn't understand that they don't find you through your DNA. They find you through your cousin's DNA or your sibling or somebody else who's posted. So you're out of luck there if you're trying to avoid it. But digging deeper, I found out that wasn't the real reason he was afraid. He has a niece who is a quarter Italian through his father. His grandfather came from Italy. She did her DNA through Ancestry and had no Italian DNA. So how does somebody whose grandfather came from Italy show up with no DNA? In his mind, there's some sort of non-paternal event going on there that he's terrified that he's going to confirm if he has his DNA done. Well, in researching his tree, his grandfather that came from Italy was from northern Italy, and the DNA shows a whole lot of German blood that they didn't think they have.
Yeah, you're gonna get a lot of that in northern Italy.
Yeah, it appears to me that the Italian family was actually German DNA-wise, and that's why there's no Italian DNA. But that's beyond his comprehension. I had the same situation with my mother, my grandmother was from Sweden, and when we got her DNA, it was part Swedish and part Finnish. And my grandmother and mother kept saying, but her family didn't come from Finland. They can't have Finnish DNA. But obviously some of her Swedish ancestors and, Finnish ancestry. But a lot of people don't understand, they know the story. I'm Italian, I'm Swedish, I'm whatever. And if the DNA doesn't match that, it's beyond them to comprehend it. But I still haven't convinced him to take the test, but we're working on it.
Yeah, Italian DNA is tricky like that because DNA doesn't know borders, It's gonna be all over Europe, basically. So, like, northern Italy has a history of mingling with, like, Austria, Germany, and all of that, Northern European. But this is other stuff you go in the peninsula, everybody's mostly, like, parts Greek, Arabic a little bit, Caucasus, that area, because of ancient settlements of the ancient Greeks in, like, Calabria or something like that. Because Italy is just as mixed as the rest of Europe, and you're not gonna have anybody that's like full Italian.
Well, and it also depends on which company tests you and how they define their geographic.
Yeah, that too.
And those,
Yeah.
so
Well,
there's a lot that goes into the interpreting your ethnicity.
Yeah, I was
keep
told
that in
a
mind, though.
long time ago that Ancestry was the best place for Italian Americans like myself to test because of the database there. So
Well, let's kind of talk real briefly about it, because I'm not here to recommend which test you take. That is completely a personal decision and what you want to do. I can tell you personally what I think, which does not necessarily mean anything, by the way. But Ancestry has, as Chris says, is the largest database. A lot of people that want pure European testing do MyHeritage. You'll get more hits on a global basis or non-US basis, I guess I should say, with MyHeritage. And those are the only two I'm going to mention. We won't go into the others because there's a lot of them and they all have their purposes out there, but those are the two most popular ones that we see. And I know that we've touched a little bit on the Americans going back and tracing back to Europe, and Hillary gave us a European example. Do we have any other Europeans here that would like to share their DNA story to some of us Americans who don't get normally to hear your side?
I can share. I've tested at pretty much all of the main testing companies. On Ancestry, I found this match. I didn't know who she was. She's a reasonably distant match, and it turns out she's a fourth cousin. She was adopted out of my family. My dad's third cousin was born over here. He emigrated to Canada, and he had a relationship with somebody, and this DNA cousin match was a result of that. And then he married somebody else after that. So she told me that she had found out who her biological father was and has met him already. So that was a good story.
Well, that ended up being really good too, that you didn't have to break any news that she already met.
Yeah.
Now, John, is interesting. For those that are new to WikiTree or don't do a lot of the hangouts and LiveCasts in WikiTree, I call him Irish John. And John's always interesting to me because you've got a strong Irish line and a strong English line. So I always go to him for a lot of Wales research as well as Scottish research. So I'm just going to now kind of mention real quick that if you have taken a DNA test and if you're like me and you get to Wales and I cannot speak the language or read the traffic signs, I always laugh at that with Hillary during the Hangouts, then there are other WikiTreeers here that can help you if you have your DNA and you have your source documentation leading you to a country where it becomes problematic because of language or location or research, how to research. There are other WikiTreeers here that can help. And since I'm mentioning that, I'm going to ask Rock Extraordinaire, who's helped me a little bit with the McMahons. Patty, what's your story?
I can tell a story about a family who were neighbors of my grandmother in the same townland, but they didn't know it. These people contacted me from California several years ago, and they had lots of DNA matches from that part of County Clare, Ireland. But all they knew was their grandfather was Eugene Lynch. He showed up in California. He eloped with their grandmother. The police were on their trail, but eventually he was allowed to marry her. And they had 4 children, and around the time of the 1910 census, he disappeared and was never heard from again. And I said, not only can I tell you that your ancestor was from Ireland, by looking at your shared matches with the people from Moveen, I can tell you who his grandparents were. They were Michael Lynch and Mary O'Dea, and it had been handed down to me orally who Mary O'Dea's sister was, and that's how I was able to triangulate the DNA matches. So this guy at this stage has been missing for nearly 110 years, and I can tell them where his grandparents lived. But the mystery deepened. We knew that the grandparents had 4 sons, all called Lynch, and we got descendants of all 4 to test, and none of them were close enough matches to the Californians for that son to be Eugene's father. It took me about 2 years to have this bright idea. What if Eugene was using his mother's surname? And I looked at a sister of those 4 brothers that we'd been chasing, and she had married a man called Curry and had a son called Eugene. And Eugene Curry is a famous name in Ireland, name of a famous historian from the same area, but this was a different Eugene Curry. And he went to New York. He was born around the same year as Eugene Lynch. He emigrated around the same year as Eugene Lynch. In New York, he was married to a neighbor from at home in Ireland. And their descendants were looking for what happened to Eugene Curry. He abandoned his wife and his 2 children in the early 1900s, told them he was going to California, would send for them when he had a place to live, and they never heard from him again. So it turned out he changed his surname from his birth surname to his mother's maiden name. And we proved all that subsequently with Y-DNA comparisons. And the evidence had been staring us in the face for 2 or 3 years, and we hadn't seen it.
Oh, that's amazing. And Patty, you mentioned something, and I know you do a lot of DNA work. Could you explain the word triangulation that you mentioned?
Triangulation, we found a long segment of DNA that was shared by 3 people. That's where triangulation comes from. And we knew that one of them was a descendant of Mary O'Dea, One of them was a descendant of Catherine O'D, and the third one had the surname Lynch, and Mary O'D's husband was a Lynch. So we could say that was an OD DNA segment that passed down through Mrs. O'Connell to one of her descendants and through Mrs. Lynch to another two descendants. So it just means finding a piece of DNA that three different people can trace back to a common ancestor shared by all three.
And I will mention too that I'll drop the link real quick again, that if you use Greg Clark's DNA confirmation citation, you just fill in the blanks and it kind of walks you through, and he tells you there is a special button for the triangulation that says, you know, you're doing this involving 3 or more DNA matches, as Patty mentioned, that are greater than third cousins. So if you know, because you're going, say, to Ancestry and it tells you that they are greater than third cousins, then WikiTree does require you to do a DNA confirmation statement that is a triangulation calculation. In Greg's app, you just literally click the button and it'll ask you the information, go step by step by step by step. I think Greg at one point in time did a tech, maybe 2023 WikiTree week or WikiTree day. I think maybe he did a tech presentation on it, and I believe if you go down to the bottom of that link page, he has a short video. But definitely show up for some of the tech Zooms or the tech Cubicle parties that are coming up later this week, because Greg is in them. And if you see Greg is there, ask him, say, can you tell us a little bit more about the DNA citation thing? He's really great at explaining things. He really is. So, and we've got time for a couple more that are coming through. Anybody else like to share?
I've got a new story if anybody's Sandy.
Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, so earlier this year, this is a DNA story and it's also a value of WikiTree story. So I'd gone down my step line, which is Axe. I'm not an Axe by birth. It's an interesting surname in that it's, you know, it's kind of contained enough you can track down lots of them, even if they're not your line. So anyway, I got an email from somebody. We'd spent 40 years trying to track down this Adam Axe that was born about 1818 with no luck. There's a longer story here about, I figured out who he was through family tree DNA. I put all that information out, got him, you know, connected him to Germany and got him back to late 1500s, which is kind of the end of the church record. So that's an interesting story right there to be told. But so somebody reached out and say, so why do you think you're this 12th? Why'd you put this 12th child in for George Axe? I'm like, well, and at that level, all the Y DNA was pointing that way. Y DNA pointed to ancestors, and there I matched to 4 or 5 of the children. So I said, nobody else had him in there, but I'm throwing him in this tree. And like, oh, okay. Well, that's kind of interesting. And he starts telling me the story, and I learned apparently there's a whole group of people that research this line. He connects me with somebody else, and then I finally get to the Axe family genealogist out in York, Pennsylvania, and we have a long conversation. She starts telling about all the Y DNA testing they did 10, 20 years ago. And she's talking about markers that don't line up with family tree DNA. And the punchline here is that I'd forgotten all about this, but so Ancestry used to do Y DNA. They abandoned it in 2014, and these people had a huge set of information. She sends me this chart that I couldn't find anywhere online of all the 4 or 5 people that did Y DNA tests, and they just sort of stopped doing the Y DNA after that. So I talked to her further. She didn't know about family tree DNA, so I'm trying to get. So I got her to get. She knew a lot of the side family, so she had that one person that would test. That she knew she could get to test. The other ones, some had passed away. So we were able to get, as soon as that person tested, they were clearly, a 0 or 1 match on family tree DNA. So the moral of that story is I'd never come across any a project so well defined by the early Ancestry Y DNA tests, which unfortunately are abandoned. And the second part of this story, really on the WikiTree side of things, is this conversation doesn't happen if I don't put all this information in WikiTree. That statement there has nothing to do with DNA, really, but it has to do with of all the places I'm at, I tend to find by 10 times this amount, I get 10 times as many people reach out to me that are actually active genealogist type folks compared to my heritage, compared to um, 23andMe, which is, more health stuff, and even Family Search. I spend a lot of time in Family Search just because, it's kind of it's got a huge tree and it's got tons of hints. But rarely people reach out to me. So
And I want to thank you, Marty, because you mentioned FTDNA, and I just put into the chat that you can now connect. There's a new collaboration. The thing is about 3 months old, but you can connect your WikiTree to Family Tree DNA, and that's just step one. That hopefully we'll see the collaboration expand as we go through the months and years from that. But Marty, I'm going to ask you, since you mentioned why DNA. I am a fan of the big Y. Going to I used to tell clients that it's worth the expense. It's not cheap, but it's worth the expense. And then one of my clients, my husband, took it, and he has 0 matches on his big Y. This is very funny because most of Mags is very DNA. And we were chatting in the Appalachia Project channel, and she saw it. She goes, "Wait a second, let me see his tree." No way, no way. And it was like, well, I'll be darned. There are no matches, but that's a rare occurrence. So I believe there are still 3 Y tests on Family Tree DNA, and I always recommended to take the big Y. Would you say the same, Marty?
well, I'm married, so I have to get it through the budget committee. So that's part of the challenge. So yeah, and I got the full I got the full Ancestry subscription and that damn $10 a month one. Anyway, so yeah, so at some point it becomes real money. Yeah, I'm going to put that on my Christmas list. Actually,
yeah, because they come on sale around that time. So perfect.
I'll be honest. I also haven't been engaged with them much, but there's the goons, the Guild of One Name Study guys, and they're they've got a much more laser focus on Y-DNA than probably the general community does. So I've sat in on some of the chats, and there's a guy over there by the name of John Lyle. I think he might be in WikiTree also. I've just asked the really hard questions, and it's interesting, but it's for the on the casual side of finding it's not going to do a whole lot for you. I get obsessed with finding cousins, which is not really that useful, but it sucks up a lot of time. So it's not going to help me find cousins per se. And part of the argument seems to be more of a long-term value proposition to build up a big database. So so at some point I will do it. I just haven't got to it yet. I would tell you, so Y-DNA on my stepfather's side, man, it pointed a certain direction. Y-DNA on my birth name, which is I used to be private, but it's Spangler. It was my birth father's name. Linover. Oh, Linover's I'm Linover 1 in WikiTree because that's my mother's name. That was on my birth certificate. But yeah, the Spanglers, man, there's those people. They didn't sleep with spouses apparently. There's not a lot of on my Y-DNA. I can't even find a common. Yeah, it's weird. I can't find a common surname in there.
Surname. It's interesting to see. And I think that for those of you that are looking at the big Y, and that's what we call it, the big Y. And I'll just tell you that it's the most expensive test, and it's not cheap. It is not, and it does take a while to process. So if you've done the, and it's for males, you're checking your mail line. So if you've done an Ancestry test, Ancestry will come back fairly quick. The big Y takes time. It's a little bit more detailed. It takes a little bit more time to come back, but it's for those more distant mysteries that you might have. And the reason why my husband took it is because his great grandfather, great grandfather, his parentage, his father's parent was unknown, and back in Austria at the time, there's certain days that you could go to the church to get baptized with only the mother and not the father present. So there's a lot of mysteries there, and we were hoping to, try and figure out. And that's why I was very curious about this particular event, this Cubicle event, with the other people from America coming in, the Europeans and things like that, because I've always found that a lot of Europeans, your records are a little bit better. They're definitely deeper, right, in scope. And so a lot of times Europeans will not test because they know, they have paper sources to know. And this brings me to a question that happened at the very, very beginning. And I apologize, I can't remember who said it, but this is something that is also required on WikiTree, but this is also required for genealogy and genealogy when come around. So if you have if you don't have a parent listed anywhere in your source documentation, so let's say that you do not have the father listed, I'll kind of use Marty's example. You have the mother listed on your birth certificate, but not the father. Is that correct, Marty?
Yeah, Illinois has very specific laws related, and this is a very state-specific thing.
Yeah.
They have a certain verbiage of, I forget what exactly is it, something like not disclosed, agreed on both parties. Everybody knew who the guy. It was a college thing. Everybody knew.
Yeah.
Generation before me all knew who it was, and we and this is a whole nother story, but we both sides have completely benign disinterest in each other.
Yeah.
So.
And this is where it gets a little tricky too, because remember, we're family historians, but we're genealogists. Let's not sell ourselves short. We are genealogists here, and we look for sources. We look for proof. And if you don't have a father listed anywhere in your paperwork, or from birth throughout the years, census, maybe in a will, then how do you prove that? And somebody asked that I
DNA's the
had
only way.
Yeah, I have DNA proof, but I do not have the source, the paper source documentation. So remember that on WikiTree, the policy is you must have both to confirm.
Well, that's what I'm just out of luck then.
Well, I am
my grandfather is absolutely not on any of the source documentation.
Well, that's just to
only in DNA.
Keep in mind, that's just to click the button confirmed by DNA. So you can put a big research note there. You can definitely do that. And I will tell you that I'm in the same situation. My biological father is not on my birth certificate. Somebody else's. And this is why I don't personally subscribe to the phrase that this person's work or this person's genealogy tree is genealogically correct. Because mine, if somebody took my birth certificate, it is not genealogically correct in my mind, because for me, I include DNA in my genealogy.
And my mother, she was illegitimate, and they put there was no father on the birth certificate.
And
there was a family legend about who her father was, and I was until very, very closely before she died, I was not able, it took me a while, but I was able to determine who her father was, and it was not who was in legend.
Was it through DNA that you determined that? Yeah. So my mom is the same situation.
And he was a Chickasaw Indian. That was what was interesting to me.
That was interesting. So keep in mind,
there was no history of tribal.
You can still mark the parent as confident. You just cannot mark it as DNA confirmed. Just that little radio button. That's all I'm talking about, that little radio button. You can still add all the DNA information on the profile, keep it separate, add lots of notes, explain why you did not mark that profile as DNA confident, because WikiTree, and to be honest with you, genealogy in general, so, evidence explained, we want both. We want source documents and the DNA. This is my personal dilemma. It's my mother's personal dilemma as well, why I can't mark it that way. But it doesn't change anything with the profile. It truly won't. I mean, it does change.
I don't think I knew about that policy when I originally did mine, put my information in. I don't think I knew that. because I think I've got them all marked as DNA confirmed.
And you know, is there going to be a like a DNA confirmation police to come after you and say no? There's not. But I think it would be really great to document why you didn't mark it or why you did mark it, but you don't have a source paper. Because keep in mind, all our work hopefully is for descendants 100 years from now.
I'm dressing now, babe.
So
I'm
I was
dressing
gonna,
now.
yeah, Sandy, I was gonna say, I do have one weird piece of documentation.
Mhm.
So when my mom passed away, I got into the her safety deposit box. And lo and
yes.
behold, lo and behold, there's a letter from my birth grandparents. I'll just paraphrase it. It's not really long. It basically said, "Oh, you're so brave to keep the." This is 1957, Central Illinois, not rural, but oh, you're so brave to keep the child, and we hope you name him after our son Rodney. And which asks a whole lot of questions. There's a whole lot of questions like why
Yeah.
would the son's not is walking away? Why the hell they'd want me named after him? Um, um, but I think my mom is kind of a strong-willed person. It's like, I'm having none of this. But she did keep the letter for me to see after she passed. So, you know, is that proof? I mean, what's your definition of proof?
Okay, so I'm really
it's a
I'm
piece of
glad.
it's a piece of information.
No, I'm thrilled you mentioned this because I wasn't going to mention this. So I'm thrilled you mentioned this. So I was sharing with Greg Clark because he created this app, and we were talking after a roundup one day. I said, "Hey, I've got a question for you about your DNA." And I don't have source documentation to prove my father. I just don't have it. The only thing I have are letters that he wrote to me before he died, about a dozen letters that I'm sorry, I knew we were both married. We decided this was the path to take, and explained the exact actual path that happened. I just want you to know that I always thought of you. I'm your father. I love you. I'm so glad we met in later life as adults. So I was talking to Greg Clark about this, and he goes, that's is a type of source documentation. It's
I
not a
also
birth
have my
certificate.
my grandmother was a avid journalist. So we've got 40 years of her diaries.
Yeah.
And I was looking at them last time went down to see my aunt who has them, her sister, but I haven't bothered to look at, it's not 19, I haven't bothered to look at the summer of 56, which would be when I would have been conceived. So I'm like,
do it. Take a trip.
Yeah, I'll bite that bullet at some point. I just haven't yet. So anyway,
take a trip. But then is a type of source. Is it a primary? No, but it is, and it's in his handwriting. As you know, it's not type, and probably the same as your letters. So I chose not to put the letter on his profile, but I did explain that I am in possession of letters. And so because as we learned with the panel yesterday for writing the narrative, remember who we're writing the stories about, and there's still living people involved. So that was kind of it. So yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, Marty.
It's not a whole lot different than if you used letters from your ancestors. If you had a letter from the 1800s saying these are my children, or this is when I got married, we'd count that as a source. So the fact that it's a recent letter.
Or a Bible, when they write into a Bible and things like that.
Can I make two quick comments?
Mhm.
You were asking about the Europeans being tested, and something that I have learned through working with the Global Project, this whole concept of what's your ethnicity is really a very American kind of thing. If you were born in Vietnam, you probably don't have a lot of need to take a DNA test to find out what your ancestry is. You're probably going to be Vietnamese. So they don't do the testing like the rest of us do with the frequency. They don't have that curiosity. Where do my ancestors come from? Now, it may be valuable to finding cousins in that, but as far as determining their ethnicity, that really is a very, like I said, a very American thing, because our ancestors come from everywhere. But most of the world, your ancestors come from wherever you were from. The second thing, unrelated to that, I wanted to, you are talking about where to get DNA tested, which company to use. One thing to check out when you're making that decision, some companies will allow you to transfer your DNA from other companies. So for example, Family Tree DNA will allow you to take your Ancestry DNA and transfer it over. So if you pay for Ancestry, you don't have to double pay for Family Tree DNA. The number of companies that do that is reducing very rapidly. MyHeritage used to let you transfer over. They just stopped this month, so now you have to pay for the full MyHeritage testing. But that's something to check out, especially with some of the smaller companies. You may be able to go pay at one site and then transfer over for free to the other site. So just something to keep in mind when you're making your decision.
And we're running out of time. We went a little bit over. I just want to quickly mention something, and then I want to go to Delbert, who's been so patient, had her hand raised for a while. If you're doing a MyHeritage test, they are doing, I'm not going to go into all the details, they are doing some updates and things of that nature. So apparently if you buy the test now, send it in, take it and send it in after the end of this year, January, because they are doing some updates. I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. And you guys can ask more questions about that in the chat, in the Discord chat for this particular one. And let's go ahead and end it with Delbert.
I had a question regarding the conversation you were having about the validation. So I have like some second cousins, however removed, in Ancestry that show that I'm a DNA match. So I'm able to add all of them, but based on what you guys are saying, I can say Ancestry validation, but it's not a parent, it's not an aunt, an uncle. So does the relationship matter in order to use that option to say DNA validation?
So the DNA confirmation. So if you add the relationship, if you add the, let me see if I make sure that I'm understanding correctly. So if I add my right now, if I add who is my stepfather, the man who raised me, as my father, then that's going to help propagate up possible DNA matches in WikiTree, because I could add Mickey Mouse as my father, and it would do that. So whether I confirm him, hit that radio button with confirm with DNA or not, that doesn't matter. Was that the question?
Well, what I'm asking is, I'm looking at, because I'm literally adding all of her lines to WikiTree, except the living. So she's a fourth cousin or third cousin, one time removed, fourth cousin, 15 centimorgus. She is a DNA confirmation, at least through Ancestry. So when I add her profile, I want to add this DNA verify or confirmation. And then at the bottom on the source, I just put DNA match because she's not in WikiTree. So I'm doing all of this to encourage her to join, to see if she'll add her DNA. But other than that, I'm just wanting to make sure I understand that feature.
So I guess let me make sure I'm understanding again. So DNA statement is just text. It's just text on a profile. It doesn't really do anything except if you do not have it on a profile and you click DNA confirmed with the parent, then it's going to give you an error if you don't have the statement on the profile. But otherwise, if you have the statement on the profile and you just say parent is confident or parent is confirmed with DNA, then you're still good. Nothing's.
But there isn't a parent, only because we're talking about my connection to her goes back to the early 1800s.
So you still should be fine, because she's connected to the tree through marriage, or how's she connected?
She's a descendant like me. Our ancestors were probably siblings.
Okay, so I think you're fine with the way that you have the profile. And this has nothing to do with DNA, but you did remind me of something else, and I meant to mention it on Monday or Sunday. So thank you for mentioning it. A lot of people ask, how do I know if the profile is connected to the tree? And I mentioned that because you need to be kind of connected to help with the DNA matches that you see on the side of the profile. There's a couple different ways. There's the little green puzzle man at the top of a profile if you're not if that profile's not connected. But truly, one of the easiest ways to figure it out, scroll down to the bottom of the profile. If you do not see the featured profiles of the week at the bottom of that profile, they're not connected. If you see the feature profiles all the way at the bottom, like if you go to your profile now, I assume everybody's connected, you'll see the featured profiles, but on an unconnected profile, you won't see that. And you can have connected groups that are not connected to the tree, and you still won't see that information, the feature profiles down at the bottom. So you want to try and get, I can't remember, there's an extremely large group on Family Tree or on WikiTree right now that is, they are connected to each other, but they're not connected to the big tree. And I think it is a little bit of a GEDCOM mess, and they're trying to figure it out whether these are actual people or not. So that's kind of where we're going. But that was a tangent, Delbert. I'm sorry. Did I answer your question?
That's okay. I think this is new to me, so I'll study it a little bit more and ask a question later somewhere if I need to.
Well, definitely ask it and drop the profile link in the Discord for this particular event, and then myself or one of us will go and look at it and see. Sometimes I'm a little too visual, and I need to see the profile too.
Me too.
To see what we're talking about. Okay, no, I just want to let everybody know this is a huge monster day. This is such a popular request day. We've got the DNA panel, and if you've done anything with DNA, or if you've seen that colored block cousin chart, guess what? The person who kind of brought it to life and started it is going to be on the DNA panel. We've got Monster House pros that came to WikiTree for free to talk about the panel. I've got over 20 questions. I'm not going to make it through that we're going to ask them. Haley's going to be in the chat because this is going to be on Zoom. This isn't going to be on YouTube. This is going to be on Zoom because, as Chris mentioned earlier this morning, it's huge. It's a huge event. I'm going to moderate the questions to the pros. Haley's going to be in the chat because everybody's going to be muted except for those guests, and she's going to moderate the chat going through and answering questions that you might have. Aowen's going to let everybody in because we have a little bet going on how many individuals are going to be there, and I think, Haley, we're expecting well over 100. So keep that in mind. So as you come to the panel event, it's just going to be amazing. It will also be up on WikiTree's YouTube, but not instantly. It'll probably take about a day to get up there because it's a 2-hour event. Lots of good questions. We're asking privacy. We're asking a lot of questions that we asked in here. And if you're new to DNA or if you're experienced in DNA, we've got questions for both of you.
Sandy?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it something I should go do, even though I haven't done DNA yet?
Oh, definitely go. Even if you haven't done DNA, definitely go because they might help alleviate your fears and your nerves. And then if you do DNA and you get your DNA back in 30 days, you'll still remember watching this presentation, this panel presentation, and you will remember some tips or some ideas from it. So definitely attend. And then after that, Chris is doing the ethnicity cube. And I think, Chris, you might want to open the room up a little early for that. Everybody share their ethnicity, and you can share it in the chat. So if you go to wherever your DNA test is, if you just want to share, remember, this is a public environment, so do not share people's names and things like that. We're just going to share your breakdowns, your pie charts and things like that, but do not share the living people's or recently deceased people's names and things like that for your ethnicity. I can't wait, Chris. I can't wait.
All right, can't wait either. Should be fun.
Okay, and will the room for the panel be open earlier? Probably not much earlier, but keep in mind that only the guests and the moderators will have their mics. Everybody else will be muted for that, so we can get through the questions pretty easy. I would say that the panel room Zoom will be open maybe 5 minutes early, but not much before that. Jam-packed it. And see you same place, same time tomorrow.
See you
Bye,
the
guys.
next one. Bye.
Thanks.